We all know that smoking cigarettes is terrible for our health, both short-term and long-term.
We could attempt to shock you with statistics like how many people die from smoking every year or how many years smoking takes off your life.
But what's the point? You know that already.
Instead, this video is about what you don't know about smoking and using tobacco.
Because what you don't know really can hurt you. We'll also hear from two doctors who have seen the devastating effects of tobacco firsthand. Dr. Jonathan Whiteson, a cardiopulmonary specialist,
And Dr. Shobhana Gupta, a physician scientist in neurology.
Okay, let's get started. While you're watching, be sure to keep track of how many of these facts you already know and which information is brand new.
Today's cigarettes are more toxic and disease-causing than the cigarettes your grandparents may have smoked.
Cigarettes today, unlike cigarettes of the past, have ventilated filters and chemically altered tobacco, making them even more harmful and even more deadly than earlier cigarettes.
Ventilated filters were originally developed to try to restrict the amount of toxins like tar from smoking that is inhaled with each puff. But what ends up happening with these ventilated filters is that the nicotine delivery is also diluted. And so to compensate for that, smokers try to take deeper and longer puffs and they smoke more frequently. And this low-dose, high-frequency behavior actually has a reinforcing effect and in fact leads to higher rates of addiction in smokers.
So smokers aren't getting the fix they need from one cigarette, leading them to smoke more and more.
Smoking more cigarettes leads to buying more packs, which means big money for big tobacco.
In addition, these filters do not block the bad chemicals in cigarette smoke.
They only block the biggest tar particles, while letting the smaller bits travel deeper into your lungs, where they can cause serious damage.
The tobacco industry is a science, and they continue to study the most effective way to deliver nicotine to the body, because if they can deliver nicotine effectively, they can much more rapidly get you addicted to the cigarette.
So the structure of today's cigarette is very different from its predecessors. But even the tobacco crop is different than it used to be.
Tobacco farmers use a slew of fertilizers and insecticides that make the product more carcinogenic and dangerous.
Nicotine is the reason people become addicted to cigarettes.
Nicotine is a powerful chemical compound and the main ingredient of tobacco.
Nicotine is as addictive as cocaine and heroin and tremendously difficult to come off and withdraw from. Part of the reason is nicotine is so much cheaper and so much more available. It affects the same centers within the brain, the dopamine releasing centers within the brain that produce a great sense of satisfaction and relief and comfort.
Using this pleasuring signal actually makes you want to continue to smoke. Taking away nicotine actually gives you withdrawal symptoms like anxiety and irritability, further promoting the continued use of nicotine.
Nicotine is the tobacco plant's natural protection against being eaten by insects. In other words, it's a natural insecticide.
It's also a poison. It's as lethal as strychnine and 3 times deadlier than arsenic.
If an adult accidentally ingests 2 cigarettes, or a child accidentally ingests 1, death may occur.
You can also get nicotine poisoning just by having skin contact with wet tobacco leaves, a disease known as green tobacco sickness, common among tobacco harvesters. According to the most recent Surgeon General's report, we now know that smoking causes type 2 diabetes, also known as adult onset diabetes.
Diabetes is a serious condition that can cause heart disease, blindness, kidney failure, and nerve and blood vessel damage of the feet and legs, which can lead to amputation.
Smoking increases the risk of getting diabetes by about 30 to 40%, and this risk goes up if you smoke more cigarettes per day and also with each number of pack year history that you have. So the more you smoke, the more likely you are to get diabetes. Smoking causes an increase in the levels of glucose in your blood, and that likely happens because you are more and more insensitive to the insulin. And in addition, smoking increases the amount of fat that's deposited around the abdomen, and this has also been shown to have an adverse effect on glucose tolerance. So together with all of these effects of smoking, you are more likely to get diabetes. Patients with metabolic syndrome already have a 5 times higher risk of developing diabetes. If you compound that with smoking, you have things such as high blood glucose levels, likely because the body isn't responding to insulin properly. In addition, you're going to have increased deposition of fat in the abdomen, and that also leads to impaired glucose tolerance. So all of these factors combined together lead to a substantially greater risk of developing diabetes in the setting of metabolic syndrome when you smoke.
Bottom line, if you're a teen struggling with diabetes or pre-diabetes, don't smoke. It's that simple.
It's true, smoking damages your eyes.
It's because the chemicals in cigarette smoke restrict blood flow to the tiny blood vessels that keep your eyes healthy.
Not enough oxygen gets into these tiny vessels. So exposure to smoke over a long period of time keeps these cells from reproducing properly and supporting the normal healing process.
Smoking can have very serious effects on the eye, causing diseases such as age-related macular degeneration, where you lose vision in the center of your visual field. Smoking damages the retina, which is a very delicate tissue in your eye that is sensitive to light and sends signals to the brain. And in the center of the retina is the macula, which is the most sensitive part of the retina and is responsible for sharp vision. Smoking actually damages this part the most, and that's when you end up with age-related macular degeneration, which is the most common cause of vision loss in people over 65.
And we now know that age-related macular degeneration is caused by smoking.
Smoking also causes cataracts, a clouding of the eye's lens. When the lens clouds up, your ability to see through it is impaired.
Cataract is a medical condition that causes blurring of the lenses in our eye, which leads to blurry vision and in severe cases can lead to blindness. Cataracts require surgery for correction. Studies have demonstrated that people who smoke have a much higher incidence of getting cataracts. The damage that is caused by smoking persists for decades, even after a person stops smoking.
Cataracts and age-related macular degeneration both lead to impaired vision and, in serious cases, blindness. And both are caused by smoking. It's dangerous for the developing baby if the mother smokes while pregnant.
The carbon dioxide in tobacco smoke suppresses the amount of oxygen in the blood for both mom and baby. This increases the risk of ectopic pregnancy, miscarriage, stillbirth, premature birth, and low birth weight.
A developing baby in the womb can also be hurt by secondhand smoke.
Babies who are born to mothers who were smoking or babies exposed to secondhand smoke are much more likely to die from sudden infant death syndrome. In addition, they are more likely to be born with much less weight than babies who weren't exposed to smoke, and they can also be born with deformities such as a cleft lip or a cleft palate. These deformities can seriously interfere with a baby's ability to nurse and must be corrected surgically for a baby to thrive. In addition, babies who are exposed to secondhand smoke are also at a greater risk for ear infections and also much more frequent asthma attacks.
Smokers, both male and female, have lower fertility rates, making it more difficult to get pregnant.
Smoking also lowers a man's fertility by impacting sperm count and sperm health.
The more you smoke, the greater your chances are of infertility. And so you can't conceive a child when you decide that you want to have a baby. And then if you're smoking when you're pregnant, you are affecting the developing fetus, and that's been associated with a host of developmental disorders in children.
It's not just cigarettes that cause tobacco-related illnesses.
Smokeless tobacco, like dip and snus, are just as dangerous and just as deadly. You might think that smokeless tobacco is safer because there's no smoke. This is just not the case. The incidence of cancer and disease is just as high with smokeless tobacco as traditional cigarettes, and the consequences are just as dire.
Smokeless tobacco is very dangerous and can cause severe cancers of your lip, your tongue, your jaw, your throat, nose, and larynx. And these can have very serious permanent deformities and even cause death.
Secondhand smoke is the smoke inhaled by others who happen to be nearby, and it kills about 50,000 people a year in the U.S.
Adults are not the only ones who suffer because of secondhand smoke. Unfortunately, children are exposed to cigarette smoke regularly, either at home, in cars, or in public places that still allow smoking, such as restaurants and parks.
If you're smoking around infants or young children or your younger brother or sister, you can cause them to have an increased risk of chest infections and ear infections. Those have been associated with developmental delay and poorer academic success in school. So smoking affects the people around you.
Third-hand smoke is the smoke residue that lingers on carpets, curtains, clothes, hair, and furniture. It is particularly dangerous in places where babies and toddlers crawl around.
Small bodies have a lower threshold of contamination, so the impact on babies and small children is proportionately more hazardous.
You might think that third-hand smoke gets cleared away when you vacuum or wash the couch or the inside of your car, but unfortunately, this is not the case.
It's the first-hand smoke that affects you, it's the second-hand smoke that affects people around you, and the third-hand exposure as well, and especially to infants who crawling around on the floor and exposed to dust and dust particles, and this third-hand smoke, as well as second-hand smoke, much more significantly than larger people, older people, adults, and associated with sudden infant death syndrome. So that's obviously something very devastating and absolutely related to cigarette smoking.
Closed and small environments like cars are truly lethal. Smokers in cars cause major second and third-hand smoke contamination for anyone else in the car, even when the smoker is not puffing on a lit cigarette.
4.9 trillion cigarette butts are discarded by smokers every year. This is an astonishing amount of toxic waste affecting our environment.
It takes 25 years on average for cigarette butts to decompose. So think about the lingering effects. It damages our water systems, wildlife, and contributes to the greenhouse effect.
Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane have a tremendous effect on the planet, including global warming and rising seas.
I think environmentally there's a huge cost to the cigarette and tobacco industry as well. Think of all the trillions of cigarette butts that are discarded. It takes so many years to break down. I think 25 years in landfills and 5 years in the ocean. It's a long while that we're polluting the environment. It can be dangerous to small animals, to birds, to fish who may get these butts in their food system, as well as greenhouse gases being produced, the methane and the carbon dioxide that gets released into our atmosphere that may be contributing to global warming. So environmentally, the use of tobacco and smoking cigarettes is not very good for our environment at all.
Smoking hurts every organ and system of your body, including your immune system.
For many years, doctors and researchers knew that smoking is somehow related to a weakened immune system and the cascade of problems that come when your body's defense shield is broken.
But recent research has demonstrated that smoking may actually cause these conditions.
Your body's immune system is a complex network of cells and processes that work to protect them from foreign pathogens and agents that can cause diseases. If your immune system is broken down, your body becomes more susceptible to these diseases. Smoking hurts the immune system in two ways. First, it actually introduces harmful agents into the body, such as carbon monoxide and carcinogens into the body. And secondly, it actually diminishes the body's ability to respond to these pathogens, causing it to become more vulnerable to diseases. All of a sudden, with a broken down immune system, you're more likely to get diseases like the flu and more serious illnesses like cancer, arthritis, tuberculosis, and many, many more. With a broken down immune system, your body is basically defenseless against many, many attacks, and you generally won't feel good.
Smoking also causes autoimmune disorders, where your body's immune system mistakenly attacks healthy cells.
By now, you may be asking yourself, is there a safer alternative to smoking cigarettes? You've probably heard a lot about e-cigarettes as an alternative to traditional tobacco.
Electronic cigarettes, or e-cigarettes, also called e-hookahs, hookah pens, and personal vaping devices, are a new type of product that allow users to inhale liquid nicotine.
Many people think that e-cigarettes are a safer alternative to smoking traditional cigarettes, but this just isn't true.
There have been no long-term studies on the safety of e-cigarettes. And contrary to popular belief, e-cigarettes are not an approved method for quitting tobacco use.
Despite the e-cigarette industry's desire to have everyone believe that electronic cigarettes are an effective method of helping you quit smoking or quit tobacco, it is not a method and should not be used to stop smoking. There are approved and studied methods of quitting smoking using approved nicotine replacement products like the patch or gum or lozenge, but electronic cigarettes are not studied, are not proven to help people quit smoking, probably dangerous to use, and should not be used in an attempt to quit smoking.
Another danger from e-cigarettes and hookah pens comes from the fact that if the liquid nicotine is ingested, it can kill.
This is especially true of small children, who may swallow liquid nicotine from e-cigarette cartridges.
While e-cigarettes don't have the same toxins associated with burning tobacco leaves, such as tar, the nicotine vapor itself can be very damaging to the lungs of not only the smoker, but also someone exposed to the nicotine vapor secondhand. The liquid nicotine that's in e-cigarettes can actually be lethal upon injection, which makes them much worse than tobacco leaves. The refill bottles for e-cigarette cartridges can contain up to 7 grams of nicotine, and just a tablespoon of this solution can be lethal to an adult. Even a few drops of this solution can actually kill a baby.
You've learned a lot about the dangers of tobacco.
You've seen that using tobacco actually causes many of the diseases we always knew were associated with cigarettes.
And that smoking cigarettes reduces your ability to fight off these diseases.
We also learned that dip and snus are potentially just as dangerous as traditional smoking.
And e-cigarettes aren't the answer either. We still don't know the long-term effects of using e-cigarettes, and so far studies haven't proven their safety.
Now, be honest. How many of these 10 did you actually know about?
Well, now you know them all. The top 10 bad things you didn't know about tobacco.